Far out!
Exploding. It's gonna hurt you bad.
Holy crap, that was insane.
Picture this. It's a regular Tuesday morning. You're in your car, maybe heading to work, maybe grabbing groceries. The sky looks gray, but hey, it's Missouri. Gray skies are basically the state bird. And then, without much warning at all, the atmosphere decides it's done playing nice. Ice the size of baseballs starts falling. Not rain, not sleet, chunks of frozen destruction crashing down at terminal velocity, caving in rooftops, detonating windshields, and turning parking lots into scenes that look like something out of a disaster film. In a matter of hours, Springfield, Missouri, a real city, home to real people living out a real ordinary Tuesday, is reduced to a war zone of shattered glass, flooded ceilings, and darkness. More than 10,000 homes lost power. An animal at the city zoo was killed. Highways shut down. A Walmart had to be evacuated. Police patrol vehicles were destroyed. And the entire thing was over almost before anyone had time to process what had just happened to them. This is the full story of April 28, 2026, what happened, why it happened, and what Springfield is dealing with now. The atmosphere was loaded. To understand how a Tuesday morning turned into this, you have to understand what the atmosphere was doing in the hours before the first hailstone fell. Across the Missouri Ozarks, conditions had been building quietly since the early hours of the day. A warm front was pressing northward, hauling deep moisture and raw atmospheric energy up from the south and feeding it directly into central Missouri. At the same time, the atmosphere was experiencing something meteorologists call vertical wind shear, winds at different altitudes blowing at different speeds and in different directions. On its own, wind shear is interesting. Combined with that surge of warm, moisture-heavy air rising from below, it becomes the ignition switch for something far more serious. The result was ideal conditions for supercell thunderstorms. And if you're unfamiliar with what a supercell actually means, it's not just a big thunderstorm. Supercells are organized, rotating storm systems that can sustain themselves for hours, and they are responsible for producing some of the most extreme and destructive weather that exists anywhere on this planet. Giant hail, catastrophic straight-line winds, tornadoes. Supercells are where all of that comes from. By late morning on April 28, the atmospheric setup over Springfield wasn't just favorable for supercells. It was essentially a perfect blueprint for maximum hail production. The National Weather Service had already been tracking the situation closely and had issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the area ahead of the event. Their alerts warned of potential golf ball-sized hail and wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour. What actually fell from the sky made those warnings look modest. 2 waves. Zero mercy. What made this storm especially punishing was that it didn't just hit once. It hit twice. The first wave slammed into Springfield and the surrounding region at approximately 11 o'clock in the morning. Hailstones began hammering everything exposed: vehicles, rooftops, windows, infrastructure, open ground. Residents scrambling for cover or shelter in place looked outside to find the ground blanketed in ice, and that ice was big. Dangerously big. After a brief and deceptive lull, the second wave arrived around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, hitting areas that were already damaged, already reeling, and already trying to figure out what had just happened to them. Back-to-back punishment. No recovery window. No time to move your car, cover your roof, or make a plan. Meteorologist Justin Titus, based at the Springfield National Weather Service office near the airport, confirmed that following the first wave alone, his team measured hailstones reaching 4 inches in diameter. Let that land for a second. A standard baseball is just under 3 inches across. These weren't just large hailstones. They were larger than the object we use to describe large hailstones. And they were falling fast, driven by the storm's updrafts, with the kinetic energy to punch clean through roofing material. Titus reported that the densest damage corridor stretched from the northwest of Republic through the northern and western portions of Springfield, but the destruction wasn't contained to any single corridor. Reports of significant hail damage flooded in from across the entire city and from communities throughout Greene County, making clear this was not a narrow strike but a wide and indiscriminate assault. What it did to the city. Nicholas Zangara, spokesperson for the Springfield Greene County Emergency Management Office, said reports came pouring in from across the entire county almost immediately as the first wave passed. The hail ranged from pea-sized in some areas, still damaging at high velocity, all the way to full baseball-sized stones in the worst-hit zones. And the damage reflected every point of that range. Windshields across the city didn't crack. They exploded. Roofs weren't just dented, they were penetrated. Exterior siding on homes and businesses across Springfield was torn apart like cardboard. The destruction had a maddening randomness to it too. One street might walk away with minor dents and a cracked mirror. The next street over looked like it had been hit by a mortar barrage. Springfield Branson National Airport took one of the most concentrated hits of the entire event. The open parking lots surrounding the terminal offered absolutely no protection for the dozens of vehicles sitting in them, and the hailstones went to work with brutal efficiency. Rental cars, personal vehicles belonging to travelers mid-trip, employee cars, it made no distinction. Anything parked outside when the storm came through was hammered. Airport officials acknowledged the devastation immediately and urged affected vehicle owners to contact their insurance providers to begin claims as quickly as possible. The sheer volume of damaged vehicles in the parking lots alone, just one location in one city, was staggering enough that officials said a complete damage assessment for airport property could take several days to complete. Airport Director Lou Behrings confirmed the facility itself stayed operational, but warned that flight schedules could face significant disruptions for hours or potentially days as damaged ground equipment and logistical cascades worked their way through the system. Out on Interstate 44, one of the region's main arteries, drivers found themselves facing a situation with very few good options. The hail was falling so densely and so fast that visibility dropped to near zero. Drivers had no choice but to pull over to the shoulder and sit there, exposed, hoping their vehicles could survive the bombardment. Many couldn't. Shattered windshields and heavily damaged bodywork were reported across the highway from multiple locations. In one of the most striking images to come out of the storm, the Missouri State Highway Patrol shared videos on social media showing their own patrol vehicles, purpose-built, reinforced law enforcement cars, sitting with shattered glass and caved-in hoods. When police cruisers look like they've been through a demolition derby, the scale of what just happened stops feeling abstract. The lights went out. While hail was tearing apart Springfield's surface, the storm was simultaneously going after its power grid. By 12:40 in the afternoon, Springfield City Utilities confirmed that over 10,100 customers had lost electricity across the city. The northern sections of Springfield bore the heaviest brunt of the outages. Utility crews moved immediately, and roughly 2 hours later the affected count had dropped to around 4,200. By approximately 4 o'clock that afternoon, the vast majority of customers had power restored. Given the scale of what had just hit, that timeline for restoration deserves real credit. But those hours in the dark, during an active severe weather event, in a city simultaneously dealing with flooding, structural damage, and a storm still potentially bearing down, were genuinely frightening for a lot of people. Inside the Walmart, inside the zoo, the hail didn't care whether you were indoors. At a Walmart supercenter in Springfield, hailstones punched directly through the roof. Water began pouring in through the holes, and with ceiling panels at risk of collapsing under the accumulating weight, the store had to be evacuated immediately. Customers and staff were directed to designated shelter areas while what had minutes earlier been a routine shopping trip turned into a genuine emergency. Imagine doing your weekly grocery run and having the ceiling start coming down because of ice. Over on North Kansas Expressway, the library station branch had its roof torn through as well. Water damage inside was severe enough that the library closed to the public the following day, Wednesday, April 29th, to allow for inspection and repairs. The parking lot of the nearby courtyard by Marriott also became a graveyard of hail-battered vehicles, adding to a list of affected properties across Springfield that kept growing with every new report. And then there was Dickerson Park Zoo. The zoo confirmed it had sustained significant structural damage and would be closed to visitors on Wednesday. But beyond bent fencing and damaged buildings, the storm delivered a loss that no insurance claim can account for. One animal at the zoo died during the storm. Another was injured and placed under immediate veterinary care. The zoo did not identify the specific animals in its initial statement, but the loss was a gut punch, a reminder that when nature turns violent, it doesn't aim only at property. It takes lives. The kind of lives that can't be repaired or replaced. The farms and the fields. Beyond the city limits, the damage reached into the surrounding farmland of Greene County with its own specific kind of cruelty. Spring crops that had been carefully planted and nursed through the season, weeks of labor and investment in the ground, were beaten down and destroyed by the hail. Greenhouses sustained damage. Agricultural infrastructure across the region was hit. For farmers whose entire livelihood runs on seasonal cycles, a single storm event like this isn't just a bad day. It can be financially devastating in ways that linger for years. But the farming community's response to that devastation said something. Local farmers announced they would replant as quickly as conditions allowed. No drama. No waiting. Their message was direct. They were going to keep feeding their community, full stop. Because that's what they do. That kind of resilience, delivered quietly in the immediate aftermath of a financial catastrophe, is worth naming out loud. What comes next for Springfield? In the days following the storm, the focus shifted to damage assessment, recovery logistics, and the long road back to normal. Zangara confirmed that Greene County officials would conduct thorough damage assessments once weather conditions fully stabilized. Those assessments would be reviewed to determine whether the region qualifies for federal disaster aid, a determination that can be the difference between a community bouncing back in months versus struggling for years. Officials also confirmed that damage reports from residents with insufficient insurance or no insurance at all would still count toward the assessment process. For people who feared they had no recourse because they lacked full coverage, that was a meaningful reassurance. Emergency management officials also issued a specific warning that residents shouldn't ignore. Even if your roof looks intact after a storm of this magnitude, the impacts from baseball-sized hail can create invisible hairline fractures in shingles and tiles. Those cracks may not leak during dry weather, but the next significant rainfall will find them. The guidance was unambiguous: get a professional roof inspection, even if the damage isn't obvious to you from the ground. The city's recovery infrastructure began spinning up quickly. Temporary insurance assessment centers were being established across Springfield to manage the enormous volume of claims expected to come in. Auto body shops and windshield repair services were already bracing for waiting lists stretching weeks out as thousands of vehicles, ranging from minor cosmetic dents to completely destroyed windshields, needed attention. City officials also began systematic inspections of outdoor gas meters and power infrastructure potentially compromised by the hail, working to identify and eliminate secondary hazards before they could cause additional problems. The forecast, and what it means. After the savagery of Tuesday, the weather forecast that followed it felt like the city was finally being allowed to exhale. Meteorologists predicted significantly calmer conditions in the days after the storm. Clear skies and sun were expected, though temperatures would remain slightly below seasonal norms. Thursday's outlook called for generally dry weather with only minor overnight shower chances. Most importantly, no further severe storm risk in the immediate forecast window. For Springfield and Greene County, that forecast meant more than just nice weather. It meant recovery teams could work without interruption. It meant inspectors could safely assess rooftops. It meant farmers could get back into their fields. It meant the thousands of people still dealing with the emotional and financial weight of what had just happened could take a breath and figure out what comes next. In just a few hours on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday, the atmosphere over Missouri had deployed baseball-sized ice projectiles with enough force to kill, flood, destroy, and darken an entire city. Tens of thousands of people were directly affected. Millions of dollars in damage had been done. And an animal that had nothing to do with any of it never made it to Wednesday. Springfield is resilient. The community will come back from this. But what happened on April 28, 2026, is a stark reminder that nature doesn't schedule its worst moments. It doesn't wait for a convenient time. It doesn't care that it's a Tuesday. It just arrives, and you need to be ready before it does. That's the full story. If this kind of in-depth weather coverage is what you're looking for, hit subscribe. Because at Nature Report, we don't just tell you what happened. We tell you everything about why.